Good afternoon. Thank you for calling in today to participate in our Lunch and Learn for August, How to Recognize and Manage Stress and Burnout. I'm Karen Merrill, LCSW, RBH presenter and EAP counselor, and I've had the pleasure to facilitate many of these workshops. So in the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to look at stress. What is it? What causes it? How to recognize it? Ways to manage stress? The difference between stress and burnout? Causes of job burnout? Warning signs and consequences? Burnout, prevention and recovery, and the concept of emotional intelligence and its role in managing stress and burnout. Polling questions will be interspersed along the way, and if time allows, we will review the handouts attached to this training and answer any questions you may have. So what is stress? Stress is a normal physical response to events that make you feel threatened or that upsets your balance in some way. When we sense danger, whether it's real or imagined, the body's defenses kick into high gear in a rapid automatic process known as the fight or flight reaction, or something that is also called the stress response, something you're probably aware of through previous stress management trainings or even readings you may have done. It really is that kind of fight or flight reaction is our reptilian brain taking over. It's a primitive kind of reaction that makes us tense up and react in physical kinds of ways. Common causes of excessive workplace stress. For many years, organizations have undergone cutbacks, reorganizations, lots of causes for workplace stress. And these are just a few of them. So fear of being laid off, that there'll be reductions and that jobs will be lost. More overtime or work due to staff cutbacks. Pressure to perform to meet rising expectations, but without resources or increase in job satisfaction, and pressure to work at optimum levels all the time. If we were in the room together, I would ask you for other causes that you were aware of, and there are probably a number of them that you might be able to list. So recognizing stress, how do we know in our own body, behavior, actions that tell us we're stressed? We can feel anxious, irritable, or depressed, feel overwhelmed, fatigued, excessive tiredness, having trouble concentrating or focusing. Physical symptoms, muscle tension or headaches, or sometimes using alcohol, drugs, or food to cope with the discomfort of stress. Think of your own situation when you feel stressed. You may not be able to observe all of these things we've talked about, but an awareness based on how our work performance goes can give us clues. When we feel overwhelmed at work, we lose confidence and may become irritable or even withdrawn. As a result, we're less productive and less effective in our job, and then the work becomes less rewarding. If we ignore the warning signs of stress, they can lead to bigger problems beyond interfering with job performance. Chronic or intense stress can also lead to physical and emotional problems as well as impacting relationships at home. So recognizing when we feel stress, what the symptoms are, can be very important in learning and recognizing ways of managing that. So let's look at our first polling question. And when you've attended these before, you may remember that what you do is, even though several of these feel like things that you've experienced, that you pick the one that most resonates with you. So how do you know when you're stressed? Do you generally feel anxiety or depression, feeling overwhelmed, experiencing fatigue or having trouble concentrating, experience physical symptoms, muscle tension, headaches, or other body reactions, using food, alcohol, or drugs to cope? Which one do you feel like fits how you react to stress mostly? So we'll give you a couple of minutes and then see how everybody scores. So, Brenda, when you feel like
Okay. Yeah.
all the scores are in,
The scores are in. It looks like 49% feel anxiety or depression. 68% feel overwhelmed. 44 experience fatigue or have trouble concentrating. 47 have muscle tension, headaches, or other physical symptoms, and 29% use food, alcohol, or drugs to cope.
Okay. So, good news that folks are managing stress reactions without turning to kind of what we call self-medicating with food or alcohol. But all the other areas, it seems like, are represented, and then overwhelmed feels like the largest. And that's as we move to kind of talking about burnout, overwhelmed over a period of time is certainly something that contributes to feeling burnout. And I think how this is important in the phase of this, of looking at this training, is that the more we know how we personally react, the more ability it gives us the tools to manage our stress. So thank you for responding to that. So, kind of moving to some remedies around dispelling stress that are also helpful in keeping us from the road to burnout. First, taking time away when we're feeling stressed. If stress is mounting at work, trying to take a quick break and even physically moving away from that stressful situation, getting up, walking around the office. If getting outside the workplace is possible, certainly that is very effective, breathing fresh air. Spending a few minutes meditating, if you can, away from your desk. If not, just even kind of removing yourself with the visualization. But physical movement or finding a quiet place to regain balance can quickly reduce stress. Talking it over with someone. In some situations, simply sharing our thoughts and feelings with someone we trust can help reduce stress. Talking over a problem with someone who's both supportive and empathetic can be a great way to let off steam and reduce stress. And we know who those people are in our lives. There are people that are more sympathetic and empathetic than others that we know. Connecting with others, developing friendships with some of our co-workers can help buffer the negative effects of stress. We share these things in common, and so having folks that are there to listen to us and that we're there to support can be very helpful. Again, in ways that tend to look towards solutions, and the positive rather than the negative are the most helpful connections. Looking for humor in the situation. When used appropriately, humor is a great way to diffuse stress in the workplace. It can reduce stress almost immediately to share a good, hearty laugh with someone. When you or those around you start taking things too seriously, try to find a way to lighten the mood by sharing a joke or funny story. And, we in this section talk about using humor appropriately in that we have to be sensitive to others, but we can find things to kind of lighten the mood. The other thing is to examine our thinking patterns to dispel stress. And when we say that, we look at this system for preventing thought-induced stress called the ABC approach. And you may have seen this before. So we're going to kind of go through this model and show you how that works. So we start with a stressor, and we call that A. And that's the activating event. So to use for an example, let's say that the stressor or the activating event is a last-minute work assignment that you get just about before you go home. You've got plans that evening, and here you get a last-minute work assessment. So the second part of this, B, is our thinking about this stressor, this activating event. And these are the things we tell ourselves at that moment. So, for example, we might say, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get this done. It's going to ruin my plans. And that begins to move into our feelings and behavior, and we call that C. And these are the consequences. So keeping in this is a last-minute work assignment, you're immediately caught with feeling off guard and that you're not going to get it done. And then what you might begin to tell yourself is it's not fair, this always happens. And then your thinking is actually flooded and you have less mental capacity to solve the problem. So to prevent thought-induced stress, we're going to kind of roll back a little bit. And again, with this last-minute work assignment, an alternative way to think about this is, okay, I've got this task. I'm going to take a deep breath and take this one step at a time. In terms of our feelings and behavior, we might then say, anybody would find this stressful. It's not just me that would feel overwhelmed at this moment. Let's take a deep breath, ask for help if we need to, and find ways to chop this up to get the job done. So not that this is an easy thing to do, but it is something to kind of look at in terms of what does our belief system tell us when we're hit with a stressor. So moving forward, now we're going to start talking about the difference between stress and burnout. And it's still helpful to remember these tools that we've introduced to help reduce stress. So if we think about this, stress generally involves too much, and burnout involves not enough. So burnout may be the result of unrelenting stress, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it isn't the same as too much stress. Stress, by and large, involves too much. Too many pressures that demand too much of us physically and psychological. Stressed people can still imagine, though, that if they just got everything under control, they'd feel better. Burnout, on the other hand, is about not enough. Being burned out means feeling empty, devoid of motivation, and beyond caring. People experiencing burnout often don't see hope of any positive change in their situation. If excessive change feels like drowning in responsibilities, and I think sometimes that is the feeling, I'm drowning in all these demands, burnout is more like feeling all dried up. One other difference between stress and burnout, while you're usually aware of being under a lot of stress, and we hear our coworkers say that all the time, we don't always notice when burnout happens. So again, what is burnout? Physical and mental exhaustion, loss of motivation to work. The job burnout equation. The amount of demands on us and the time we have to accomplish those demands equals job stress. If we look at how much control we have over that work stress, how much we care about getting that done, and how long that's gone on in terms of days, weeks, or months, that's what equals job burnout. It feels much more hopeless. So stress is characterized by overengagement. Actually, our emotions are overreactive. We can get excited easily, produces an urgency and a hyperactivity. Although it tires us out, and so we can feel a loss of energy. It can lead to anxiety disorders. The primary damage to us is physical reactions. I'm sure you've heard the expression that stress kills, because ongoing stress can lead to heart disease and other illnesses. Burnout, on the other hand, is characterized by more of a disengagement. Our emotions are blunted. We feel helpless and hopeless. We lose motivation. We lose sight of our ideals and our hope. And it leads more to detachment and depression. The primary damage here, rather than physical, is more an emotional reaction. And it may make us feel that life simply is not worth living. So the consequences of burnout are more extreme. So let's look for a second at our second polling question. What's most likely to cause long-term depression? Stress or burnout? So we'll give you a couple minutes and then ask Brenda for a tally.
So it looks like 24% have voted for stress and 81% for burnout.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. What's most likely to cause long-term depression is going to be the burnout, because it's just much more, it becomes much more of a serious emotional kind of reaction, and for lack of better word, condition. So, moving on, causes of job burnout. Primary here is a feeling of a lack of control over outcome. So an inability to influence decisions about your job, such as your schedule, assignments, or workload, can lead to job burnout. So can a lack of necessary resources to do your job, because you feel like you have no control. Unclear job expectations. If you're unclear about the degree of authority you have, or what your supervisor or others actually expect from you, you're not likely to feel comfortable about it. You don't really know what to do. There may be a dysfunctional workplace dynamic going on. Perhaps you work with an office bully. You feel undermined by colleagues, or your boss micromanages your work. These and other related situations can contribute to job burnout. There may be a mismatch in values. For example, if your values differ from the way your employer does business, those kind of core values we hold dear, or handles grievances, the mismatch may take a toll on you. Maybe a poor job fit. It may not fit our skill set so well, your interests and skills. It may become increasingly stressful over time. Or there may be kind of an extreme inactivity. So if a job is always monotonous or chaotic, you need constant energy to remain focused, which can lead to fatigue and job burnout. So these are some causes of job burnout that you might reflect on. So these next couple of slides are going to look at kind of an initial job burnout assessment. And so as we go over these questions, you might think if they resonate for you and would be helpful then kind of as we move forward with more tools that we'll present. So would you think that you've become more cynical or critical at work? Do you feel like you have to drag yourself to work and have trouble getting started once you arrive? Kind of that, inertia. Have you become irritable or impatient with coworkers, customers, or clients? Do you lack the energy to be consistently productive? Do you lack satisfaction from your achievements, even though you are accomplishing things? Do you feel disillusioned about your job and the future of the job? Are you using food, alcohol, or drugs to feel better, or simply not to feel? Although we've kind of identified that may not be a problem for this group. Have your sleep habits or appetites changed? Are you having physical symptoms like unexplained headaches, backaches, or other complaints? So these are kind of indicators of how to assess job burnout. And then those more, here the warning signs kind of come in categories of physical, emotional, behavioral. Burnout is actually a gradual process. We don't burn out all at once. It happens over an extended period of time. But it can also creep up on us if we don't pay attention to the warning signs. So these signs and symptoms can be subtle at first, but they get worse as time goes on if we don't pay attention. Now, if we think about this as red flags, then we can use this as a way of knowing that we need to address what's going on to these things. And if we pay attention, we can prevent it from getting worse or from actually burning out. So physical signs and symptoms: feeling tired or drained, having a lower immunity because we've been depleted for so long, feeling sick, physical symptoms, headaches, backaches, change in appetite. The emotional area where we have kind of a sense of failure, begin to doubt ourselves, feel helpless, trapped, or even defeated, detached, alone in the world, loss of motivation, cynical and negative, and feeling less and less satisfaction about any accomplishment. So behavioral signs: withdrawing from responsibilities. And this kind of, sometimes this behavioral realm, we get clues from those around us, either at home or at work, about how our behavior may have changed. Isolating ourselves from others, procrastinating, taking longer to get things done. We can use food, alcohol, and drugs in this area to try to cope. Becoming angry, taking our frustration out on others. Being late to work or skipping work or leaving early. These are warning signs of burnout. So, polling question number 3. If you're feeling signs of burnout, what resonates most with you? What are you most likely to exhibit? Physical, emotional, or behavioral signs? So we'll give you a couple minutes and then let Brenda tell us what the tally is.
Okay, so we have 30% of participants voting for physical,
Uh-huh.
64% for emotional, and
Uh-huh.
38% for behavioral.
Uh-huh. So the emotional was the big score, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And this kind of is in keeping with even the stress identifiers in terms of feeling overwhelmed. So knowing that is important just in terms of how you manage your stress and how you take care of yourself. Knowing that your warning signs come more into that kind of emotional category. So moving forward, what are the consequences of job burnout? So consequences can be excessive stress, having trouble sleeping, feeling tired all the time, a negative spillover into personal relationships and home life, depression, anxiety. It can come to alcohol or substance abuse when we start to what we call self-medicating. So, even if you think what's bothering you is job burnout, don't ignore the symptoms. Starting with your doctor or, an EAP provider or another mental health provider can help rule out what may be going on so that you have a better course to chart for how to feel better. So what's the best way to handle job burnout? Once we've identified what's fueling the feelings, we can make a plan to address the issues. So managing the stressors that contribute, looking at what those things are, and then crafting a plan for stress management, evaluating our options. So work-related burnout issues, discussing specific concerns with your supervisor. Maybe you work together to look at what the expectations are and have a realistic plan for solutions. Are there options for continuing education or professional development that can work on your behalf? Looking at our attitude, we know that with cynicism can come a negative attitude. So if we become cynical, considering ways to improving that outlook, and we'll talk a little more about that, but rediscovering enjoyable aspects of our work. What is it about our work that we like? What do we remember that was the motivators in our work? Recognizing coworkers for valuable contributions or job well done. And and things about our coworkers we like that we can look forward to seeing every day. Taking short breaks throughout the day, spending time away from work, doing things that you enjoy goes a long way. And kind of reminding ourselves what we have to be grateful for. Seeking support from coworkers, friends, loved ones, or taking advantage of the EAP is a perfect tool for when we're feeling stressed or burned out. Looking at our skills and passions, our interests. With burnout, we can feel defeated and less than. So an honest assessment can kind of help consider how we can feel better about ourselves. So the bottom line, keeping an open mind and focusing on what's within our control. So there's a lot of things that come in our path that are really important, changes that happen that are important, and we have to consider just how much control we have over these things. There are things that we find that are important that are controllable. We might come across things that are unimportant and controllable. There are things that are important in our lives or impact our lives in important ways, but that we have no control over. And then there are those kind of, those things that are pesky, that are unimportant and uncontrollable. Remembering what we have control over and being aware of where we put our energy is extremely important in managing burnout. So you may have seen this before. We call this the personal power grid, and it kind of blocks these 4 things we talked about out in what we have control over, what we don't have control over, what's important and what isn't. So if there's something that occurs that creates change that we have to deal with, and it's important and it's within our control, if we take action and master that, we feel better. We're taking control. We can improve that. If we don't take action, we're giving up on something that is actually within our control. If we spend a lot of time and worry on things that are important that we have no control over, we're spinning our wheels. It's really like a wheel spinning in sand or dirt. We're not getting anywhere, but we're using up energy that keeps us from putting that energy into where we might feel better. Another way of looking at what's important that we don't have control over is to not take action, to actually let it go and put that energy into where we have more control over that. So this is an important tool to remember, and also I think something to remember when our thinking gets stuck into those areas of we dwell on what's important that we have no control over. So another polling question. What on this personal power grid causes the most frustration? What is important and we have control over? What is not important that we have control over? What is important and we have no control over it? And what is not important and that we have no control over? So, again, we'll give you a couple of minutes and then we'll see what we come up with.
Wow, so it looks like 92% voted for C, what is important and we have no control over. 1% voted for B, what is not important and we have control over. And 5% voted for A, what is important and we have no control over. And 7% for D, what is not important and that we have no control over.
Yeah. So you absolutely nailed it. What really is the hardest thing for us is to deal with what is important and what we have no control over. And sometimes it causes us to have to make some choices around that. Maybe, and we'll talk about that in terms of, is this as simple as letting it go, or are there other things that we need to do? But that is absolutely the greatest source of frustration and a factor in burnout is if what we're dealing with are hugely important things to us that we have no control over. So kind of as a bit of a review, someone may be on the road to being stressed if they lack concentration, can't stay focused on the job, have panic attacks, have appetite changes, eating more or less, or actually not eating at all, increasing drinking, short-term bouts of depression, a day or two off and on, and someone might be on the road to being stressed if their emotions are more like a roller coaster, tearfulness and fits of rage, kind of up and down. Someone may be on the road to burnout if every day feels like a bad day. If caring about work or home really feels like a total waste of energy. You can feel exhausted all the time. the majority of the day spent on tasks that feels mind-numbingly dull or overwhelming. And you may feel like nothing you do makes a difference or is appreciated. The negative effects of burnout can spill over into every area of life, what we've mentioned before, including our home and social life. Can create changes long-term in our body that makes us more vulnerable to illness and colds and flu. So it's important, again, to deal with burnout as quickly as we can before it gets out of hand. So how do we do that? So we call this the 3R approach: recognizing it, watching for the warning signs, reversing it, undoing the damage by implementing stress management techniques, reaching out, seeking support. Resilience, building our resilience by taking care of our physical, emotional health and reminding ourselves what we have control over. So if you're recognizing the signs of impending burnout, if we take some steps to get our life back in balance, it can go a long way before it can get worse. But some tips is, first of all, try to start the day with a relaxing ritual. Rather than jumping out of bed, spend a few minutes meditating, keeping a gratefulness journal, doing gentle stretches, or reading something that inspires you. The idea is to kind of begin that day with a more centered approach. The things your mother told you, adopting healthy eating, exercise, and sleeping. When we eat right, engage in a physical activity, and get rest, we have more energy and resilience to deal with life's demands. It's hard to deal with those demands when we're tired, hungry, or irritated. It's just hard to kind of garner up that energy. Setting boundaries. Don't overextend yourself. Learn how to say no to requests on your time. If you find that difficult, remind yourself that saying no allows you to say yes to the things you truly want to do. Plus, for others, setting those boundaries, it sets limits for them that are also become lessons for them as well. Taking a break from technology. I cannot underscore this more. Setting a time each day when you completely disconnect. Put away your laptop. Turn off your phone. Stop checking email. You really need a break from that. Nourishing your creative side. Creativity is a powerful antidote to burnout. It shows us that we can tap into another side of our brain that can make us feel better. So trying something new, starting a project, or resuming a favorite hobby can increase self-esteem, make us feel better. And choose an activity that has nothing to do with your work, so you get a real break from that. So learning how to manage stress, again. When we're on the road to burnout, we may feel helpless, but you have more control over stress than you might think. So you might review those things we looked at in the stress, looking at managing stress section of this training. Recovering from burnout. Strategy number 1, slow down. When you've reached the kind of stage of burnout, adjusting your attitude or looking after your health may not be enough. You really need to force yourself to slow down, take a break, and heal. Maybe use some vacation time. Assess realistically what that might look like. Maybe a conversation with your supervisor would be helpful at this time. Cutting back on commitments and activities so that you can reflect and heal from what you're experiencing. Getting support. Our natural tendency when we're feeling burned out is to protect what little energy we have left by isolating ourselves. But friends and family are more important than ever in difficult times. So sometimes even sharing your feelings with another person can relieve some of that burden. Reevaluate your goals and opportunities and priorities. As hard as it may also even be an opportunity to look at, are we in the right place at this time? It's an undeniable sign, burnout, that something in our life's not working. So looking at our goals and our hopes, are we neglecting something that's truly important to us? It can be an opportunity to discover what really makes us happy and what we might need to reach for once we've recovered some and feel better. So now we're going to look at the concept of emotional intelligence and how this can help with stress and burnout. So emotional intelligence was a concept, many years ago, developed by a man named Daniel Goleman, and you may know of his work. But his thinking was that emotional intelligence in interrelationships at work and at home is really more important or equally important as intellectual intelligence. So there's 5 keys here that we need to master. Number 1, realizing when we're stressed, recognizing our particular stress response. What is that for us? Knowing what our stress management cues are to help calm us down, whether that's deep breathing, focusing on nature, positive visualization. What they say is the best way to reduce stress quickly is through our senses. What we look at, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, and what we touch. Staying connected to our internal emotional experience so we can appropriately manage our emotions. Our moment-to-moment emotions influence our thoughts and our actions, as we well know. So paying attention to those and factoring them in is important. Recognizing the use of nonverbal cues. So we know that 95 to 98% of our communication is nonverbal. What we say is less important than how we say it. So watch that in ourselves and watch that in others to discover what's going on. Develop the capacity to meet challenges with humor. There's no better stress buster than a hearty laugh, and nothing reduces stress quicker in the workplace than mutually shared humor. So it's important to remember that. And resolving conflict positively. Conflict is absolutely going to happen. It's natural. So resolving it in healthy, constructive ways increases trust and diffuses workplace stress and tension. So remembering that as well. So our last polling question, true or false, emotional intelligence is as important in dealing with others as in managing our own reactions. Give you a couple minutes.
Okay, it looks like 100% of participants voted true and 1% voted false.
Perfect. Absolutely true. Emotional intelligence is a valuable, valuable skill in dealing with others as well as ourselves. So some other ways of looking at improving EI is looking at these other areas. So we can maintain a large measure of self-control and self-confidence by keeping this emotional intelligence in view. It kind of keeps us above the fray. So self-awareness, the ability to recognize our own emotions and their impact while using our gut feeling to guide our decisions. Self-management, the ability to control our emotions and behavior and adapt to changing circumstances. It's how well we know ourselves can be helpful in this arena as really in anything else. Social awareness, the ability to sense, understand, and react to others' emotions and feel comfortable socially. So if we keep that open, it can be very helpful. And relationship management, the ability to influence and inspire and connect with others in a way of also managing conflict. So many of you in the audience may be managers and have the additional task of, in workplace change, of managing your own reactions and then also trying to support and dealing with those that you supervise. So very important to keep these things in mind. And probably for managers and supervisors, emotional intelligence can be extremely helpful in tuning into your own self as well as others. But trying to keep communication as open as possible, giving employees as much information as you can, and listening and hearing what they have to say, consulting your employees, trying to give them opportunities to participate in decisions about their job, showing employees they're valued and trying to build in incentives, praising good work performance. In stressful situations, we forget how much feedback is important, positive feedback. Trying to cultivate a friendly social climate where there are opportunities for social interaction where we can actually kind of relate to what we like about each other. And this is a tough one, setting example around taking time off. Do you encourage others to take breaks and take time off? When we feel a workload mounting and mounting, we feel like it's something we can't give ourselves permission to do. But it's so important in trying to manage burnout and stress. So as we begin to close, we look at some action steps around how this training can be helpful and beneficial. We talk about a SMART plan, something that's specific, measurable, agreed upon, meaning you want to do it. There's a reward to it, and you can track it. So you might think about what you might want to try. What one of these suggestions from this training you might want to start, and what you may have identified as not being very productive behavior and what you are committed to stop doing. And then you may have seen that there are things you do that really are ways of taking care of yourself and that you want to keep doing. So reflecting on these things can be important. So before we looks like we have about 10 minutes left or so, I'd like to address any questions you may have before we look at the handouts because they're attached and you have access to them. But if there's questions you have, I'd like to address those for you. Any questions you have?
There's one question here. Okay. How can you tell the difference between simple job boredom and burnout?
I would say that it would have to do with what other things you may be feeling. In other words, are you also having some physical kinds of symptoms? Are you seeing, mood fluctuations, relationship changes, and how long you felt that way? And then I would think about whether or not you can alter that by finding things about the job or even enlisting some suggestions about what you might be able to do to make it more stimulating and kind of rule that out. But I think a rule of thumb would be how long you felt that way and what other things may be going on in your life that would give you the idea that it's more than just work boredom. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Karen. We do
Sure.
have one more question. Is it
Okay.
possible to be stressed out and burned out at the same time?
I think that burnout, that there's you have many of the symptoms of stress. I think that the stress symptoms would have come first, and I think it would be that I think you can experience both at the same time. I think the key there would be if you're feeling more kind of blunted, if you're feeling more feelings of hopelessness and helplessness and don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, is more an indicator of the burnout. But in terms of feeling stressed, which again can be overwhelmed and fatigue and those things, you can feel that simultaneously with those more severe symptoms of burnout. It's a continuum, really.
Okay, and then one more question.
Sure.
How do I approach management on this when they're reluctant to hear about it?
Yeah, that's tough. It's very tough. I think you've got to really kind of decide how you could have that conversation in a way that was the easiest for them to hear you. In other words, I think I've used those tools we talked about in the emotional intelligence, and how could you couch that in a way that was the easiest for them to hear. And include that that it's hard, because you can, if you're feeling it, you can imagine that management's feeling it too. And in a certain way, you're in this together. But if you're feeling that there are symptoms and you're experiencing things that are going to affect your job, then letting them in on it is really the best thing you can do. Kind of try to work together on it. Not easy. It's hard.
Okay. The next question is, how do we handle working on a project that usually requires 4 or 5 employees when we are reduced to 1?
Not knowing specifics, I would say that you'd need management's help to help you create a plan to be able to do that. I can also imagine that if you're feeling like you're in it all by yourself, it's an overwhelming task. So I think that you have to enlist help to be able to move through that. And maybe part of that support comes from just talking with others about how you're feeling, but also talking with those in charge in management with, I need your help to be able to get this done. And it might be helpful just to look at using EAP around how do you take care of yourself through that kind of difficult time. Okay. Anything else?
Yes, a few more questions. If you see a coworker that shows signs of stress, should you approach them?
I would say that depends on the history of the relationship. I mean, if it's somebody that you have a friendship with or you feel comfortable with, I would use, if the opportunity comes up, to kind of say, I've noticed such and such, in a compassionate open kind of way and offer support to that person. And I'd let the history of your relationship kind of be a guide. And look for an opening to be able to talk to them about it. Okay.
Okay, the next question. I'm a manager and have been trying to support our team, yet upper management is not supportive of their workload. Any suggestions?
I think you have a really hard job, and you're riding that kind of line between trying to, help employees. I guess I'd try to find my voice again with management and see if there's, again, kind of a way of having that conversation that is easier for them to hear, and also lets them know that, there are also consequences. I mean, that people will become disengaged and uninvolved. And I think it might be helpful for you as a manager to focus on how you can get support through the EAP or other things in terms of just finding ways of reinforcing yourself as you go through this. And I know we're just about out of time, and I know people often feel like their time is very valuable. So, Brenda, do you think we should have folks just send some emails and then I can respond to them?
I think that would be the best thing to do.
I hate to take too much of people's time.
We can respond by email.
And I'm happy to do that. And also, you might look at that handout packet that's attached to the training, which has some good tools, both assessment and strategy-wise as well. Does that sound like a plan?
That sounds perfect. Yes.
Okay. Thank you all so much for listening. And I know this is tough stuff, and I hope there's some aspects of this that you'll try and that are helpful to you. Have a good afternoon.